Now in the middle of our 25th year, a quarter of a century of service to the worldwide amateur radio community, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, your all-amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. This is edition number 1327, with a release and air date of Saturday, August 3, 2024. Please take the program to your air following the cue tone.
On the air and on the internet since 1993, serving the amateur radio community with weekly, reliable, amateur radio news and special features, we are This Week in Amateur Radio. We are the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1327 of This Week in Amateur Radio. The FCC announces that a new emergency alert system code is coming soon to the United States. We will have the details. The ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology adds a new third level, while the generational legacy is carried forward. The ARRL Board of Directors completes its second meeting of 2024. We will have an in-depth report. The Intercontinental Net is looking for a few net controls. We will take a special look at the use of amateur radio during hurricanes, reporting ground truth back to the national weather forecasters. The 2024 Olympics Special Events Station is on the air now. We will have a look at the communications preparedness strategies for the wildfires happening in Canada. SpaceX is contracted by NASA to develop an enhanced Dragon spacecraft to deorbit the International Space Station. And, we were curious. Who listens to BBC radio content internationally? We will have the details on this and a lot more coming up in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benschop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will answer the question, does the International Amateur Union actually represent you? Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR returns with another edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will takes us on board the Wayback Machine to go back to the early 1900s, where we will be witnessing the beginnings of QST magazine. We will stop by and visit with Bill Saliers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, Radiosport DX, upcoming contests, and more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air, right now. Reporting from our overheated headquarters studio facility here in Albany, New York, this is W2XBS.
And reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting this week from my ham shack, where every time I fire up the 80-meter transmitter, my wife's book light blinks on and off. She finds it very annoying. Oh well, carry on. I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our news bureau in Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, I'm Dave Wilson, WA2HOY.
And reporting from our news bureau in Knoxville, Tennessee, where the storms just won't stop coming, I'm Josh Marler, AA4WX.
And reporting from our Troy, New York news bureau, where the humidity makes it feel like you're being hit repeatedly in the face with a warm, wet blanket, I'm Eric, KD2RJX.
And recording from our news basement here in Scotia, New York, I'm Savo, K2SAV.
And reporting from our news bureau, just outside Albany, New York, in the Geek Cave studios, I'm Rich Lawrence, KB2MOB.
And reporting from our Catskill radio station in the western mountains of upstate New York, where it's had 4 inches of rain in the last 4 days, I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where someone has turned the outside oven clear up to broil this week, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR.
And now, as our lead story, here is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
Leading off our news this week, the Federal Communications Commission is hoping to add a new event code to its emergency alert system and will meet to consider the proposal on Wednesday, August 7th. The 3-letter code, MEP, is designed to cover those individuals who are overlooked by existing codes, such as Amber Alerts, which focus on abducted and missing children. The MEP event code for missing and endangered persons would also be used in wireless emergency alerts. The FCC believes the new alert code would fill a need to bring awareness to the thousands of people, mainly missing Indigenous and Native women, who cannot be located. Many tribal organizations in the various Native communities have urged the FCC to activate the code. FCC Chair Jessica Rosenworcel said it would allow for a more rapid and coordinated response to incidents and build on efforts by tribal nations, the Department of Interior, and the Department of Justice to collect comprehensive data on missing and endangered Indigenous person cases. The FCC said the manufacturers of equipment used in the nation's emergency alert system will be given time to upgrade software and do whatever else is necessary to integrate the new code. Last year, approximately 188,000 adults who were reported missing in the United States fell outside the criteria for Amber Alerts, according to the FCC.
ARRL continues to develop the highly successful ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology. With more on this story, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, who files this special report from League headquarters.
As is done with new equipment in the amateur radio hobby, a prototype is being tinkered with this week, TI-3. Third phase of the program is centered around space. Teachers who have each been through the previous versions of the program are at ARRL headquarters in Newington, Connecticut, to test the program. ARRL Education and Learning Manager Steve Goodgame, K5ATA, said that having the experienced educators on hand to test out the new training is invaluable. This is really about taking a step further, providing a highly specialized form of training. We've developed a good program, but you never know how well something is going to work in practice until you try it. The educator hams of this first cohort couldn't be happier to experiment with it. I like that it's a small group and that it's laid back and that we're all in it, knowing it is a beta group, so if something doesn't go exactly as planned, the people that are here are very flexible in changing what we're doing, said Megan Tucker, KQ4MAM, Dean of Curriculum, STEAM Specialist at the Hillsborough Charter Academy in Hillsborough, Virginia. Tucker learned all three of her amateur radio licenses since last October, and she says, for me, as someone who has been very dialed into aerospace, it's nice to get into something that's a little more technical. I was petrified coming in, and the best part about that is once you're here and you're with other people, you see that everyone had different strength and it's possible. Educators have built and released pico balloons, antennas for radio astronomy, and other more advanced projects within amateur radio. The cohort will cap off the week with a field trip to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Haystack Observatory. More information can be found at www.arrl.org/TI. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
The ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology is funded entirely by gifts to the ARRL Education Fund.
Now celebrating our 25th year keeping the amateur radio community around the world informed, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available worldwide as a podcast from our web at twiar.net.
As ARRL continues to empower teachers to bring amateur radio and radio technology into their classrooms through the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology, many generous donors have stepped up to enable the work. For more details, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, at League headquarters.
Parents can make all the difference in someone's success. David Ginsburg, N3BKV, knows that well. His parents, Hi and Mimi Ginsburg, supported his passions. Whether it was my mom driving me to the planetarium for weekend classes that allowed me to learn about the universe, or to my father taking me to my first Hamfest and his support of this hobby, they saw my passion for amateur radio and how it gave me a focus to learn about science, computers, and electronics through it, he wrote. David knew he wanted to pay that forward to honor his parents' dedication to fostering curious minds while supporting the future of amateur radio. He chose to establish the Hi and Mimi Ginsburg educator position within the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology. The program equips teachers to incorporate amateur radio and wireless technology into science, technology, engineering, and mathematics STEM curricula. The TI is funded entirely by donor contributions through the ARRL Education Fund. Teachers pay an application fee, but all other costs of transportation, lodging, and course materials are covered, and it costs $4,000 to send a teacher through the program. David Ginsburg wanted that to happen in the name of his parents. They knew the power of knowledge and believed in supporting teachers when they were both alive through many charitable endeavors, he said. The first High and Mimi Ginsburg educator is Danielle Adler, K6FIN, Doctor of Education. She is the founder of San Diego Youth Science, an organization that partners with many schools to advance youth involvement in marine sciences. Dr. Adler is excited to take the knowledge she gained in TI back to the young people as she impacts so many that they can get their hands now on with radio. Providing students with ways to participate in an authentic science is incredibly impactful, and radio science can be a wonderful and relevant tool, wrote Dr. Adler in a thank you letter to David Ginsburg, citing the impact his parents' legacy will continue to have. In the last 3 years, 175 educators have attended the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology. There are 7 cohorts of the program in 2024, but the goal is to scale it to 10 for 2025. There's demonstrated success with this program and a great opportunity to continue growing, said ARRL Director of Development Kevin Beal, KE8EAL. By having the support of people like the Ginsburg family, ARRL will continue to enable educators to grow ham radio in the generation that will likely take humanity to Mars and beyond, said Beal.
I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ. More information about the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology can be found on the League's webpage.
There is still time to register for the 2024 USA and International Amateur Radio Union Region 2 Radio Orienteering Championships to be held in Chelsea, Michigan on October 5th through the 13th. The regular registration deadline is August 15th, and the late registration deadline is September 15th. All radio transmitter hunters, from beginners to experts, are invited to participate in a full week of radio orienteering or amateur radio direction finding, competition, and other fun events. There will be competitors from the United States, Canada, Australia, and China. The schedule includes the following: a 2-day training camp coached by course designers Charles and Nadia Charlot, the weekend of October 5th and 6th. 2 practice days, October 8th and 9th. Cultural and social outings to Henry Ford Museum and the Ford F-150 factory on October 7th. Cider mill and German restaurant visit on October 10th, among other opportunities. There will be an informational meeting, guest speaker, and casual dinner on Wednesday night, October 9th. The schedule includes 4 days of challenging championship-level racing, including prior USA Orienteering champs and team trial venues on October 10th through the 13th, consisting of sprint, fox soaring, and 2-meter and 80-meter classics. And finally, a search and rescue exhibition team contest will be held on October 12th. This year's event director is Joseph Burkhead, KE8MKR. He is a 2018 World ARDF Championship bronze medalist, 2019 144 MHz Classic M40 national champion, and has competed as an athlete for the USA Radio Orienteering team. He also competed on the Armed Forces USA Orienteering team at the 2013 World Military Orienteering Championship in Exjo, Sweden. Burkhead is a member of the Southern Michigan Orienteering Club.
The ARRL Programs and Services Committee has approved rule changes to the ARRL International Earth-Moon Earth Contest, which will start on August 25th. The contest exchange will now be the station's 4-digit Maidenhead grid square locator. The grid square now serves as the score multiplier, similar to other VHF and UHF-based contests. Previously, the contest exchange was a signal report in any mutually understood format. This change facilitates having score multipliers as part of the exchange, which will make scoring the contest less complicated. Previously, the multipliers were U.S. states, Canadian provinces, and DXCC entities, which made scoring difficult as participants who operated from different locations could not easily notate that in their submitted logs. Full contest rules along with log submission examples are available at www.awrl.org/EME-contest. If you have additional questions, please email contest@arrl.org.
A long-standing member service, the AMSAT mail alias service is scheduled to end on August 31, 2024. A mail alias on AMSAT.org permitted people to send an email to members without knowing their actual internet email address. They just needed to know their amateur radio call sign. Unfortunately, the unchecked rise in domain name hacking and email account hijacking has made it impossible to sustain this service at a cost-effective level. The number of callsign@amsat.org email accounts that had been hijacked and converted to zombie spam accounts over the years had led many internet service providers and gateway centers to ban all @amsat.org email addresses, including those business accounts of AMSAT officers and officials. The tireless efforts of AMSAT's all-volunteer IT staff has worked for years to repair much of the damage, but AMSAT still gets complaints from members who are not getting their personal emails, ANS bulletins or AMSAT BB posts because of persistent delivery problems. It has come to the point where the AMSAT volunteer IT staff can no longer keep up with the maintenance requirements to keep the alias mail list clean and to work with email gateways to remove blocks. And, after considerable investigation into alternative paid email services, AMSAT leadership decided that the money required to keep an email alias system alive would be better spent on building and flying satellites for its members. Persons using the mail alias service should begin to migrate to different email accounts so they do not lose receipt of personal emails, AMSAT News Service weekly bulletins, AMSAT BB posts, or official messages from AMSAT itself. Members are especially asked to make sure they are not using a call sign at amsat.org as their registered email address in the AMSAT membership portal. Members can easily change their registered member email address by logging into the portal and updating their profile.
If the radio industry is to convince automakers to keep AM radio in the dashboard, the global car market may require an international effort. While broadcasters in the United States continue to push for legislation that will require all dashboards to feature AM and FM radio, similar efforts are underway in Europe. The European Broadcasting Union is reportedly seeking meetings with the big car makers there, including BMW, Volvo, and Mercedes. The EBU is looking to lobby for all cars to continue featuring broadcast radios as part of their entertainment systems. Radio is thriving in Europe. In Europe, listeners choose radio about 70% of the time, more than all other radio sources combined. People love it. Just press a button, and it's there, boasts an EBU-produced video promoting broadcasting. Similar to the arguments made by broadcasters in the U.S., the radio industry in Europe touts the role radio plays in providing live programming during the times of crisis, as well as the high level of trust that broadcasters have. The EBU says many car makers are already making it hard to access the radio by burying the radio button in a complex journey of swipes and taps. Customers need car makers to make it easy for them, the video says.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
SpaceX will develop an enhanced version of its Dragon spacecraft for NASA to deorbit the International Space Station at the end of its operational life, which looks to be sometime in 2030. This development comes as part of a contract awarded to SpaceX on June 26th, valued at up to $843 million. The new spacecraft, known as the United States Deorbit Vehicle, or USDV, was detailed by NASA and SpaceX officials at a briefing on July 17th. The USDV will be based on SpaceX's existing Dragon spacecraft, but will feature a redesigned and larger trunk section with additional thrusters. Specifically, the USDV will have 46 Draco thrusters, including 16 for attitude control and 30 for the maneuvers required to lower the ISS's orbit. Sarah Walker, SpaceX Director of Dragon Mission Management, explained that the enhanced trunk section is twice as long as the regular one. The new trunk will house engines, propellant tanks, power generation, and other systems, storing 6 times the propellant of the current Dragon spacecraft and generating 3 to 4 times the power. It's almost a spacecraft in and of itself, Walker noted. Once completed, NASA will own and operate the USDV, which will be launched to the ISS shortly after the station's final crew arrives. After its arrival and successful checkout, ISS controllers will allow the station's orbit to naturally decay. The final crew will depart when the station's altitude decreases from its current 400 kilometers to 300 kilometers. The ISS orbit will continue to decay over approximately 6 months before NASA uses the USDV for a final controlled deorbit, targeting a remote ocean corridor about 2,000 kilometers long. Dana Weigel, NASA ISS program manager, mentioned that debris from the station, ranging in size from a microwave oven to a sedan, is expected to survive reentry and splash down in this corridor. The USDV will have an estimated mass of over 30,000 kilograms, including 16,000 kilograms of propellant. Due to its size, it will require a heavier class of rocket than the Falcon 9 currently used for Dragon missions. NASA plans to procure the launch vehicle separately at least 3 years before the launch. SpaceX expressed readiness to support the launch if given the opportunity. Northrop Grumman was the only other company to bid on the USDV. NASA's source selection statement indicates that Northrop's bid was significantly higher in price and rated lower in both mission suitability and past performance compared to SpaceX. Ken Bowersox, NASA Associate Administrator for Space Operations, expressed satisfaction with the proposals received, noting that he was pleased with the submissions from SpaceX and Northrop Grumman.
Although amateur radio was not taking a significant role as emergency response teams battled the fast-moving wildfires in the Canadian province of British Columbia, the challenges facing Western Canada have been providing some emergency communicators with a blueprint for going forward. Even as they keep an eye on the wildfires threatening the West, the Salvation Army Emergency Disaster Services teams have been working on a comprehensive plan called PACE, for primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency to address communications across Canada. Emergency Disaster Specialist for the Maritime Division of the Salvation Army, John Bignell, VE1JMB, said that the plan includes the critical role hams can play in disaster response efforts. Toward that end, the EDS teams are studying IP-linked systems, such as Yaesu Fusion and Echolink, and such technologies as WinLink, so that traffic can be passed even when the communication infrastructure has suffered a failure. John went on to say that we believe that by internal training and developing relationships with local hams and ham clubs in each region, we can significantly improve our disaster response capabilities. The Salvation Army EDS teams see this as an opportunity to deliver what could be needed in the future when a more extensive amateur radio involvement may be needed. Meanwhile, said John, the teams are collaborating with each division to develop a more comprehensive communication plan.
This week, the Federal Communications Commission announced the launch of a mobile speed test app, replacing the FCC's speed test app to help improve the accuracy of the FCC's National Broadband Map. The new app features repeated testing capabilities, which can be accomplished without the need to certify information before each individual test, according to the FCC's recent announcement. According to the FCC's July 23rd release, the app will now allow for users to conduct hands-free coverage tests while driving. FCC Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel elaborated on the app's capabilities and comments included in the FCC's announcement. Our new app makes it easier to share real-world experience with connectivity, empowering consumers and making it possible for up-to-date and crowdsourced information to improve our mapping, Rosenworcel said. The app also features an in-app map overlay displaying the area where the test was taken, the agency announcement also stated. Consumers deserve to know where they have mobile coverage and at what speeds, and the FCC wants to include their experiences in our effort to make a more precise map of available coverages, Rosenworcel said. The FCC's updated app, now available on the Google Play Store for Android devices and the Apple App Store for iOS devices, provides the ability for users to log into the National Broadband Map and to review their speed test results and see them on a map, the FCC release explained. According to the FCC's announcement, the original FCC speed test app is no longer allowing users to run speed tests. Users of the old app will receive an in-app notification encouraging users to upgrade to the FCC's mobile speed test app.
During the 2024 Summer Olympics in France, which runs through August 11, amateur radio operators can contact a Special Events Olympic station. Special call sign TM24PRS from Châtillon, France, will be active by Frank Bernard, F4DTO, and Patrick Bernard, F4GFE, all on the HF bands. Special award QSL cards will be available in 4 categories: bronze for 3 bands QSO, silver for 4 bands QSO, gold for 5 bands QSO, and platinum for 6 bands QSO. The awards are free only by sending a request to f4dto.frank space F4GFE Patrick at orange.fr or via mail to Frank Bernard, P.O. Box 61, Châtillon CEDEX 92321, France. Also, after the 2024 Olympic Games, there will be a special event station for the 2024 Paralympic Games, August 11 through September 8. TM2024JPP will be active on all the bands from 0000 Zulu to 2359 Zulu.
The Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation on Wednesday advanced the Plan for Broadband Act, which directs the National Telecommunications and Information Administration to develop and implement a national strategy to close the digital divide by expanding access to broadband internet. The bill includes $7 billion in additional funding for the Federal Communications Commission's Affordable Connectivity Program, which provides discounts on internet service and devices to low-income households before it ran out of funding this summer. The legislation just passed the full Senate. Since June, hundreds of thousands of Americans have lost internet service because Congress failed to provide additional funding for the Affordable Connectivity Program. Drew Garner of the Benton Institute for Broadband said in a statement this week, "We know that millions more are likely to lose or downgrade service, resulting in billions of dollars in lost consumer financial benefits and service delivery efficiencies for healthcare providers." The new act is based on a 2022 Government Accountability Office report that found that federal broadband efforts are fragmented and overlapping and recommended that the President establish a national broadband strategy. Vermont has been a leader in coordinating statewide broadband deployment, and the Plan for Broadband Act will bring some of those same strategies that have worked for Vermonters to the federal level to help ensure that every American can access the high-speed broadband they need to thrive, Senator Peter Welch, one of the bill's authors, said when the legislation was introduced in 2022.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
Coming up next, This Week in Amateur Radio is presenting another chapter of A Century of Amateur Radio, hams, organizations, events, inventions, from the mind of Chris Cordella, W2PA, and his editing team. Each episode will bring a different aspect of early amateur radio history. Coming up here on This Week in Amateur Radio.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX. I'm Bill, AJ8B. Oftentimes people ask me if there is a written copy of the information that I present. There are so many call signs, dates, and URLs being discussed, you could never remember them until such time as you could write them down. I use most of the same data that you hear in the DX Corner for the weekly DX column in the Ohio Section Journal. If you just Google ARRL Ohio Section, you will find the Ohio Section website and from there you can subscribe to the weekly journal and get most of this information. The actual website is arl-ohio.org. This is a free journal, and you don't need to be an ARL member to receive it. You won't get the well-rounded information that you get from This Week in Amateur Radio podcast, but you will get the DX information I present here. So here's what's happening in the world of DX. This section of DX News comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. And if you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, the only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com, and I'll take care of it. If you need Kyrgyzstan, here's something to take note of. UA4 LCQ Yuri will be staying in Bishkek for the next 1 to 3 years. While there, he will be operating as Echo X-Ray 7 Charlie Quebec. During contests, he will operate as EX9 Alpha. His main activity will be during contests. Yuri also plans to visit Tajikistan and could be QRV as EY8DX and EY0A. He will have a Yaesu FT1000, a Kenwood TS590, and an ICOM IC756 running a kilowatt into a 5-element 10-meter Yagi, a 4-element 15-meter Yagi, a Cushcraft A3S for 20, 15, and 10 meters, a ground plane for 40 meters, a dipole for 80 meters, and an inverted V for 160. So it sounds like he's got it all covered. He plans to put up a 5-element Yagi in September. Yuri will be active on all bands and modes. DO4UB Uli is moving to Tanzania on August 20th. He will operate as 5 Hotel 2 Mike Uniform Alpha on 15 and 10 meter sideband only with Kenwood, Flex Radio, and Yaesu transceivers, all at the country's limit of 100 watts, into wire antennas at 10 meters above ground. Next year, he will bring the rest of his equipment and antennas and will get on the QO100 satellite. Uli has plans to set up the first 2-meter repeater relay in Arusha and to work with students of a nearby school to show them, quote, how easy it is and how cheap it can be to build their own equipment and get on the air, end quote. His QSLs will be uploaded to LOTW and to Club Log. The Northern California DX Foundation, the NCDXF, announces support of the upcoming Sierra 9 Zulu São Tomé DXpedition for their inclusion of a young DXer, KJ7KOJ Angus Alexander. This will be Angus' first chance at being a DXpeditioner. He's a great operator and has the full support of his father, Whiskey 7 YED Robin Alexander, who is also on the team. Sierra 9 Zulu is led by N4XP Tom and has an experienced team of operators. The operation will take place in mid-November 2024, and I can tell you that sometime in October, the DX Mentor podcast will feature the S9 Zulu team and how it came together and what their expectations were, so you may not want to miss that. The mission of the NCDXF is to provide necessary financial support for well-organized DXpeditions to desirable DXCC entities and to support advances in DXpeditioning skills, technology, and infrastructure. Those funds come from the contribution of our supporters in the DX community. Your contribution will help make DX happen. Just a quick scheduling note. The early August Jarvis Island N5 Juliet DXpedition team have adjusted their schedule from August 5th to the 17th to August 7th to the 19th. So watch for that to come up. November 2 Whiskey Lima, Germany, Thomas, has announced his plans to be QRV from September 1st to the 8th from Rarotonga as E51WLG. Listen for him on CW and digital modes on 40 through 10 meters. He'll be running 100 watts from an IC7300 into a vertical on the beach. QSLs will be uploaded to LOTW after he gets back home. Tango Uniform Stroke TA2 YGT started July 22nd and will continue to September 16th from the Ivory Coast. Yijitkan may try to get a regular TU call sign if he can. He has 10 watts from a True SDX, a double bazooka wire antenna for 20, a helix for 60 centimeters, and offset dish for QO100. He plans digital modes, especially FT8, and quote, if I have time, SSB, end quote. He hopes to use LOTW and QRZ.com for QSLing. He is there on a business trip, so this will not be a full-time dedicated DXpedition. Zulu Alpha stroke IU3 MDI, Luca, will be in North Albania August 3rd to the 17th, with a Yaesu FT991A and a Yaesu ATAS 120 antenna for 40, 20, 15, 12, and 10 meter CW sideband and FT8. His on-air activities will be at various times, fixed or mobile. Using the call sign 8 Quebec 7 Golf Golf, S53RA Gregor will be in the Maldives on holiday August 3rd to the 13th. He plans to be QRP CW sideband and quote some FT8, mostly in the local evenings. JP1 IHD Koturu will be headed back to JD1-0 Ogasawara Islands, where he will once again be QRV as JD1BQP from October 22nd to November 3rd, including participation in the CQ Worldwide DX single sideband contest. Outside the contest, listen for him on 1.8 through 50 MHz on sideband, FT4, and FT8. He will emphasize activity on 15 and 10 meters and on 6 meters. And from the ARRL, I have this to share, and it's dated July 12th, so it's 2 weeks old. To all award participants, the ARRL award system has 3 flow processes. One process is logbook, one process is paper applications by mail, and the last process brings logbook and paper applications together in a master DXCC processing system. At present, while the logbook program is now allowing customers to submit and complete award applications online, the master DXCC processing system remains offline. Therefore, we are not yet able to fully complete final processing of any DXCC applications at this time. As soon as the master DXCC processing system is back online, we can then finish the final processing of paper or logbook applications that we have received. Worked All States applications, endorsement stickers, and certificates are able to be processed, and certificates are able to be printed and mailed, as they do not flow through the master DXCC processing system. VUCC applications are being processed and completed. However, certificates cannot yet be printed, as we have some remaining IT matters to complete with our in-house printer used for VUCC certificates. Please also note that as the online DXCC application system is not yet operational, it too is tied to the master DXCC processing system currently offline. Thank you for your continued patience and understanding. So a ham couple that I consider to be good friends had kind of a breakthrough. Jerry, WB9Z, worked 7 Quebec 5 Baker Mike in Malawi on Saturday on 6 meters. He gave 7 Quebec 5 BM a -11 and received a -14 back. Jerry says that he's been looking for 7Q on 6 meters at that time for many weeks. His XYL, Val, and November Victor 9 Lima tried to get a QSO next, but the opening was over for us, she said. Jerry looked at PSK Reporter and saw that he was the only North America station that had reported him. 7 Quebec was his number 171 on 6 meters, so congratulations, Jerry. I also have a pirate alert. Someone continues to pirate the call 5 Tango 5 Papa Alpha. The real 5 Tango 5 Papa Alpha is Johans, PA5X, and he has been off the air since August of 2022. Don't waste your time working this bogus operation, and if you do spot him on the DX Spotting Network, be sure to include the beam heading from your QTH and the word pirate so other people don't get trapped. So I do have a contest update. I know that the ARRL contest sheet is read elsewhere in this podcast, and the contests that I mention are sometimes redundant. However, there are a few contests that I have found to be especially useful for DXers who are trying to fill band slots, to increase their skills, or to get entities or zones in the log that may otherwise be difficult to get. The following contest falls into the Increase Your Skills category. The contest to discuss today is the Worked All Europeans CWDX contest, also called the WAE CWDX. This is a 24-hour-long contest that starts on August 10th at 0 Zulu and ends on August 10th at 23:59 Zulu. Many leading contesters claim the WAE DC to be the most challenging contest of the year. Being a true blue DX contest, only intercontinental QSOs between DX and Europe are counted. Therefore, the number of DX QSOs here may be similar to the amount of DX usually worked in the CQ worldwide. Moreover, the unique feature of QTC traffic adds much fun and another operating challenge to the contest. QTC traffic is the exchange of any information outside of the normal exchange. From a DX point of view, these are the worked all Europe entities. For the European station, multipliers come from the DX entities worked and the numerical call areas of several big countries, including Japan, Brazil, the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. Because multipliers are counted per band, and on the low bands they count more than on the high bands, there is significant activity also on 40 and 80. And remember, every contact is a DX QSO. Reflecting on this, you will work low band DX as well as high band DX, even in the CW part in August, as well as in the sideband part in September, despite all seasonal problems in the Northern Hemisphere. Remember, this part of the year is usually good for low band activities from the Southern Hemisphere. For a well-equipped station and a dedicated operator, worldwide DX is possible in 80 meters. In addition, the nowadays poor 10-meter band surprisingly often shows short DX openings with good rates and useful multipliers. From our point of view, the WAE DCs are significant landmarks in the yearly contest calendar, providing highest level radio support for serious contesters and fun for part-time entrants and DXers alike. So join the WAE DC. And I plan on being in there, and if you hear me, give AJ8B a call. Until next week, this is Bill, AJ8B, saying 7-3. Thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support, and I hope to see you in the pileups.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
Welcome to this, the fifth segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio, hams, organizations, events, inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. Chris Cadella, W2PA, has a wonderful website with the same title. I want to thank him for allowing us to use it in these programs. So, enjoy the next of many chapters of Ham Radio History. QST at the beginning. The membership had long perceived the need for a regular bulletin of some kind, but the League lacked the funds needed to jump-start it. So, as before, the 46-year-old inventor and businessman Maxim teamed up with 19-year-old Trinity College student Tuska to publish the first few issues themselves. They had already funded the initial printing of the list of stations and other materials. Sometime in early December 1915, the first issue of a new amateur wireless magazine went from the printer to the post office and on across the country to more than 600 members of the not quite 2-year-old American Radio Relay League. Its simple cover, a combination of hand-drawn graphics and typeset text, framed its name, QST, in a large banner flanked by 2 torches, symbols of enlightenment and truth, an implied meaning of its name as a broadcast to amateurs. This number, as magazine issues were then called, carried no volume designator. Who knew how many would follow or for how long? For the 10-cent cover price, you got 28 pages of amateur radio, including a little over 7 pages of advertisements. Due to slow sales of the list of stations book, and after consulting with members, Maxim and Tuska decided to risk a few more dollars to produce 3 months' worth QST, after which they hoped it would become self-sustaining, based in part on members buying subscriptions and the other offerings. If they do, we are all right, and we have a fine future promised us. If they do not, then the president and secretary will have lost their money and wasted a lot of hard work, wrote Maxim. On the first page following the contents, this announcement appeared. QST is published by and at the expense of Hiram Percy Maxim and Clarence D. Tuska. Its object is to help maintain the organization of the American Radio Relay League and to keep amateur wireless operators of the country in constant touch with each other. Every amateur will help himself and help his fellows by sending in 25 cents for a 3-month trial subscription. Signed, the publishers of QST. Evidently, at least a little money was coming in already, since there were ads in the premiere issue. The first one to appear just inside the front cover was for J.H. Bennell & Company Incorporated of New York, where young Irving Vermilya had gone to purchase wire years before. The ad was for 2 new specialties, a straight key for $7.50, about $170 in 2012, and a detector holder for $1.50. The ad referred to the straight key as a, quote, transmitter, unquote. The first classified ad section, called Secondhand Apparatus, appeared in issue number 2 and offered to print ads for free up to a reasonable number of words. It listed items such as audions, transformers, condensers, and coils. Also appearing in that first listing was a Martin Vibroplex key for $5, a price 1/3 lower than Bennell's straight key. Included in this material is a quote from the following. First issue of QST number 1, December 1915, December Radio Relay Bulletin, QST, December 1915, page 7. With thanks to W2PA Chris Cadella for his kind permission for the use of his website's materials, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
ARRL President Rick Roderick, K5UR, gabbled in the 2024 second meeting of the ARRL Board of Directors on Friday, July 19th, in Windsor, Connecticut. With more on the meeting, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, who files this special report from League headquarters.
The board meeting was preceded by standing committee meetings held on Thursday, including Administration and Finance, chaired by Rocky Mountain Division Director Jeff Ryan, K0RM, Emergency Communications and Field Services, chaired by Great Lakes Division Director Scott Yonley, N8SY, and Programs and Services, chaired by Dakota Division Director Bill Lippert, AC0W. President Roderick recognized new officers and board members, including First Vice President Christian McIntyre, K6WX, Second Vice President Mike Ritz, W7VO, Hudson Division Director Ed Wilson, N2XDD, Northwestern Division Director Mark Tharp, KB7HDX, Northwestern Division Vice Director Michael Sturbeck, KG7HQ, Pacific Division Director Tony Marson, W7XM, and Pacific Division Vice Director John Litz, NZ6Q. Highlights of the meeting, including the board unanimously accepting a report establishing a 3-year strategy for ARRL and recognized the efforts of the strategy working group. They authorized CEO Dave Minster, NA2AA, to proceed with further planning. The report included a revised mission statement. ARRL's mission is to promote and protect the art, science, and enjoyment of amateur radio and to develop the next generation of radio amateurs. The strategy articulates continued commitment and enhancements to our existing advocacies. Promoting amateur radio and protecting amateur radio, a new advocacy is being created, committing ARRL to develop the next generation of radio amateurs through the expansion of existing programs and the creation of curriculum-based initiatives targeted at middle and high school STEM education programs. You can read more about the ARRL board meeting at arrl.org. The complete minutes of the 2024 second meeting will be available soon on the ARRL website. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
The strategy calls for investments in information technology to continue along the path of the League's digital transformation. This will include evaluating membership models, content delivery methods, and next-generation software products along with the infrastructure improvements required to support them. With more coverage of the ARRL Board of Directors meeting, we go to our own Dave Wilson, WA2HOY.
The ARRL Board is looking to serve members in driving growth through technology. In committing to dramatically expanding our capabilities and activities in the STEM education space and investing in upgrades and additions to our information technology platform, we recognize that revenue from membership dues is insufficient to fund these initiatives. In fact, dues contribute less than half the revenue required to operate ARRL. Efforts are required to develop new sources of revenue and seek support from donors and grants from both public and private organizations. The board requested the president establish the ARRL Information Technology Advisory Committee, or ITAC, acknowledging the importance of providing information technology-based service to ARRL members and to improve and protect ARRL systems. The ITAC will engage experts in the field of IT to help oversee the development, operations, and evolution of the ARRL IT system infrastructure and applications. The board reassigned the Logbook of the World Maintenance Committee to the newly established Information Technology Advisory Committee. ITAC will support the Maintenance Committee's responsibilities with the Logbook of the World development, including technical changes and future upgrades to the system. Further, the board recommended and authorized the creation of additional publications, including books and online resources and products such as antenna kits, to help expand ARRL's commitment to help hams who are faced with limits on station building capabilities due to space limitations and/or limited resources. The board requested that the President appoint a study group to review the current structure of ARRL governance and the field organization, and suggest changes that would improve the organization and better support the membership. The board also requested that the President establish an ad hoc committee to review the ARRL Director's Workbook and establish an annual review process to keep the document up to date with board practices and procedures. The board approved expanding the policy for recording roll call votes to being required for any pending motions pertaining to ARRL governance documents. Following recent review of ARRL's trademarks and the completion of related registrations and trademark renewals, the board requested the CEO to provide a report at its next meeting consisting of efforts and actions taken during 2024 to identify, remedy, and protect the use of its trademarks by other parties. The complete minutes of the 2024 second meeting of the ARRL Board of Directors will be available soon on the ARRL website. The next meeting of the ARRL Board of Directors will be January 17th and 18th, 2025.
Celebrating 25 years of providing the amateur radio community with the latest ham radio news and information, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. The International Amateur Radio Union, or IARU, was formed on the 18th of April 1925 in Paris. Today, split into 4 organizations consisting of one for each of the 3 ITU regions and the International Secretariat, said to coordinate their efforts to represent the globe-spanning activity of amateur radio. Each organization has its own constitution, which at some point I might compare, but for now I'll focus on the International Secretariat. Last updated on the 9th of May 1989, the constitution has 9 pages detailing how the IARU works. After defining its name, it describes its purpose. Its objectives shall be the protection, promotion and advancement of the amateur and amateur satellite services within the framework of regulations established by the International Telecommunication Union, and to provide support to member societies in the pursuit of these objectives at the national level, with special references to the following: A. Representation of the interests of amateur radio at and between conferences and meetings of international telecommunications organizations. B. Encouragement of agreements between national amateur radio societies on matters of common interest. C. Enhancement of amateur radio as a means of technical self-training for young people. D. Promotion of technical and scientific investigations in the field of radio communication. E. Promotion of amateur radio as a means of providing relief in the event of natural disasters. F. Encouragement of international goodwill and friendship. G. Support of member societies in developing amateur radio as a valuable national resource, particularly in developing countries, and H. Development of amateur radio in those countries not represented by member societies. Those are lofty goals, and no doubt they have changed over the past century. The objectives, as described, have been in effect for over 35 years. So we can safely say that they are part and parcel of the current workings of the IARU. This leads me to several questions, mostly uncomfortable ones. Over the years, I have witnessed the incessant cry for the growth of the hobby in the face of apparent global decline. What I haven't seen is any evidence of the IARU actually doing much towards its own objectives. At this point, you might well be chomping at the bit to enlighten me. Please do. And you might well be right that the IARU is doing stuff, but the key here is seeing evidence. As I keep saying, if you don't write it down, it didn't happen. You do this for contacts between stations, why should the IARU be any different? While the IARU is a recognised United Nations organisation, it's entirely volunteer-run and paid for by its members. The International Secretariat is funded by its 3 regional organisations, which in turn are funded by the member societies in each country, like the WIA in Australia, ARRL in the US, RSGB in the UK, JARL in Japan, and Veron in the Netherlands. Over 160 organisations in all. Those in turn are funded by their members. For a decade or more, I contributed to the funding of the IARU through my WIA membership. I note, as an aside, that organisations like the Radio Amateur Society of Australia, or RASA, and the European Radio Amateurs Organisation, or EURAO, which are not recognised by the IARU, do not fund it, unless they're making donations on the side. That's important because this hobby, despite its amateur nature, runs on money. If you want to help the IARU, the only way to do so is as a volunteer. That's great if you have money to pay for food and housing, less so if you don't. Similarly, member societies are also, by and large, run by volunteers, each doing so in the face of big business and government attempts to increase their spectrum allocation at the expense of amateur radio at every turn. This leaves us with an organisation with lofty goals to foster, promote and grow our community, funded and run by volunteers with, in my opinion, little to show for its century history. Is this the best model? Is this how we make a robust, representative and effective organisation? Speaking of representative, in 2018, Don, Golf 3 Bravo Juliet, former president of the RSGB and then president of the Region 1 IARU, talked in some detail about how the IARU operates in an enlightening video you can find on YouTube called RSGB Convention Lecture 2018. So what has the IARU ever done for us? In that lecture, Don makes the statement that the ARRL provides significant additional funding and, without that, the IARU would be in very serious problems. If you're not a member of the ARRL, what does that mean? How much is significant funding? Is it real money or is it paper money in the form of office space provided within the ARRL offices in Connecticut? If a member of the IARU International Secretariat is also a member and office bearer of the ARRL, does that buy access? For example, in 2021, the ARRL Executive Committee nominated their past president to become the Secretary of the IARU, which, at least according to the ARRL, it has the right and obligation to. I don't know how you feel about that, but it makes me uncomfortable, and here in Australia I can't say that I feel represented, even if I was a current and paid-up member of the WIA, which I'm not. I think organisations like the member societies and the IARU have a very important role to play in our hobby, but what I don't see is evidence that they are. No doubt I'll get emails telling me to step up. I would, if I had a functioning money tree in my backyard. Transparency is an issue in our community. I left the WIA because I felt there was no transparency. The ARRL had a wide-ranging security breach recently, and whilst it has written a great many words on the subject, most of them are, at least in my professional opinion, the opposite of transparent. I have yet to see the operating budget for the WIA, the ARRL or the IARU, despite having paid money into at least 2 of those. So, what of the future of our hobby? What does representation in a modern global community look like? And does the structure of our hobby need scrutiny and discussion? I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
According to QRZ.com, the International Amateur Traffic Net, one of the oldest continuing nets in the United States, needs your help. In a posting in one of QRZ.com's forums, Holger, K2HES, said that the 20-meter net, also known as Intercon, needs additional net control stations to cover a 1-hour shift handling emergency communications. The net receives priority and emergency traffic on 14.300 megahertz daily from 1200 UTC to 1700 UTC during standard time and from 1100 UTC to 1600 UTC during daylight savings time in the U.S. Hams with at least a general class U.S. license are eligible to fill one of the available slots as net control. Visit intercontinentalnet.org. That's intercontinentalnet, all one word, .org, for more details and to see the net control schedule with the shifts that are available. The net has been on the air providing communication and goodwill since 1960.
UK regulator Ofcom has announced it plans to permit smaller separation distances and greater maximum power for users of the part of the spectrum between 3.8 and 4.2 gigahertz. Ofcom proposes allowing an increase by 3 dB for the maximum power limit of so-called low-power devices. Ofcom called these changes improvements that are part of its shared access framework, which began in 2019 as a way of giving more users access through shared spectrum. Ofcom also plans to allow unlicensed low-power devices to be used indoors on the frequencies between 2320 and 2340 MHz within the amateur radio 13-centimeter shared band. Many of these and related changes are expected to take effect in the final quarter of the year. In the meantime, Ofcom is seeking input on these proposals no later than September 18th, 2024.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
Reuters News is reporting that a U.S. appeals court on Thursday blocked the Federal Communications Commission's reinstatement of landmark net neutrality rules, saying broadband providers are likely to succeed in a legal challenge. The FCC voted in April along party lines to reassume regulatory oversight of broadband internet and reinstate open internet rules adopted in 2015 that were rescinded under then-President Donald Trump. The Sixth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals, which had temporarily delayed the rules, said on Thursday it would temporarily block net neutrality rules and scheduled oral arguments for late October or early November on the issue, dealing a serious blow to President Joe Biden's effort to reinstate the rules. The final rule implicates a major question, and the Commission has failed to satisfy the high bar for imposing such regulations, the court wrote. Net neutrality is likely a major question requiring clear congressional authorization. The court on July 12th had temporarily placed the net neutrality rules on hold until August 5th as it considered industry legal challenges. FCC Chair Jessica Rosenworcel said the American public wants an internet that is fast, open, and fair. Today's decision by the Sixth Circuit is a setback, but we will not give up the fight for net neutrality. Net neutrality rules require Internet service providers to treat Internet data and users equally rather than restricting access, slowing speeds, or blocking content for certain users. The rules also forbid special arrangements in which ISPs give improved network speeds or access to favored users. The rules would bar Internet service providers from blocking or slowing down traffic to certain websites or engaging in paid prioritization of lawful content, as well as give the FCC new tools to crack down on Chinese telecom companies and the ability to monitor Internet service outages. Reinstating net neutrality has been a priority for President Biden, who signed a July 2021 executive order encouraging the FCC to reinstate the rules adopted in 2015.
ARRL encourages amateur radio stations to prepare for what the National Hurricane Center has predicted will be a busy hurricane season. With more on this special story, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ at League Headquarters.
In addition to preparing equipment to function during and after a storm's impact, local amateur radio emergency service Aries nets are encouraged to participate in hurricane reporting and relief nets. Stations do not need to be in a coastal zone to participate. Propagation often shifts well inland, meaning ham radio operators throughout the continent can serve in times of need. Monitoring and relaying traffic is a way to help with the nets and get real-time information to the NHC, where it can be shared with the National Weather Service, FEMA, and other emergency response organizations to aid in a more rapid response and recovery, said ARL Director Emergency Management Josh Johnson, KE5MHV. Amateur radio plays a crucial role in the warning and recovery process of hurricanes, from providing surface observations, which gives forecasters at the National Hurricane Center ground truth, to providing communications when infrastructure is damaged, and ham radio is as vital as ever. Much of the focus to get the information to and from the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida. Hurricane specialists rely on having an amateur radio station at the center, WX4NHC. Julio Rapol, WD4R, is the amateur radio assistant coordinator for the station, and he pointed out these service reports can be weather data or eyewitness reports, or heard on local VHF and UHF, and they are very valuable to the hurricane specialist at NHC, as they fill gaps of data where they may not have from other means, such as government, weather stations, satellites, and hurricane hunter aircraft. The NHC would like more hams to provide information if they are in the affected area. There are many ways to do that. The simplest is over high-frequency HF amateur radio bands. There you'll find a dedicated team running the Hurricane Weather Watch Net. The net uses 14.325 megahertz and 7.268 megahertz, depending on propagation, and is usually active any time a hurricane is within 300 statute miles of a populated landmass or at the request of NHC. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
There's a robust ecosystem of communication networks that all work in tandem to provide coverage anytime a named storm is within a few hundred miles of land. These separate but partner volunteer organizations serve much of the Western Hemisphere on many different bands and modes. We are strategically dispersed across North America, throughout the Caribbean islands, Central America, and the northern coast of South America so that we can provide a continuous path of communications from storm-affected areas, said Bobby Graves, KB5HAV, Hurricane Watch Net Manager. The net has members who speak many of the languages in the hurricane zones, including English and Spanish. Now, with more on the Hurricane Watch and other nets, we go to our own Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
The Hurricane Watch Net is a two-way street of information. While the reports coming in are critical to forecasters, information from the NHC is even more important to people in the path of the storm. Weather information is relayed in real time from the National Hurricane Center throughout the network as well. In addition to the weather information and reporting, the HWN assists the Salvation Army's Saturn net with outgoing health and welfare traffic from the affected area, messages sent via ham radio from those being impacted by the storm. WX4NHC also receives reports via WinLink email over amateur radio via the address WX4NHC@winlink.org. The email subject line must start with //WL2K. There is a web form on the WX4NHC website to provide information as well. For those without HF capabilities or who may have their antennas unavailable during the storm, the VoIP Hurricane Net provides a parallel capability using modern digital technologies. VoIP Hurricane Net Manager Rob Macedo, KD1CY, says the scope of this net gives a big picture look at what's happening. Our net gathers reports from amateur radio nets and amateur radio operators at the local, state, and regional level that connect directly or liaison to our net on WX Talk Echo Link conference node number 7203/IRLP 9219 reflector. The connections to our net can include other VoIP modes such as Fusion, All-Star, Ham Shack Hotline, and certain types of DMR, among other VoIP modes via the KC5FM, Auxcom, and Sunflower systems, he said. VoIP Hurricane Net also provides observations from social media monitoring. With the robust systems in place to handle traffic, organizers encourage radio amateurs in the path of the storms to participate in the nets. We encourage all who are in the path of a landfall hurricane to join us and share their local observed weather information. No matter how insignificant you may feel of your data may be, it's very important to the forecasters at the National Hurricane Center, said Graves. Sometimes radio ham reports are the only reports received from the islands or sparsely populated areas, said Rapoli. Michael Brennan, the director of the National Hurricane Center, added, the NHC Ham Shack network has played a crucial role for more than 40 years in providing real-time information during tropical storms and hurricanes. The information provided by ham radio is incredibly helpful to NHC's hurricane specialists as it provides on-the-ground data during an event and offers a valuable option to maintain communications in situations where traditional communications methods can fail or become unavailable. We thank Sierra Harrop, W5DX, for the use of her story.
The good old-fashioned game of soccer used to be a simple affair. 2 teams of 11, plus a few subs who were all wrangled by a referee and a couple of helpful linesmen. Long ago, these disparate groups lived together in harmony. Then, everything changed. Now technology is being used to adjudicate all kinds of decisions, and fans are cheering or in an uproar depending on how the hammer falls. That's only become even more prevalent in recent times, with smart balls, the latest controversial addition to the world game, with their starring role in a recently held Euro 2024 championship more than evident. Adidas has been a pioneer of the so-called connected ball technology. This involves fitting matched balls with sensors which can track the motion of the ball in space. According to Adidas, an inertial measurement unit is suspended in the middle of the ball. This is done with a delicate structure that holds the unit stably in place without impacting the performance of the ball. Powering it is a small battery that can be recharged using an induction system. The IMU runs at a rate of 500 Hz, allowing hits to the ball to be measured down to tiny fractions of a second. The ball also features an ultra-wideband radio system for position tracking in space.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a stream to your favorite digital device on Spotify, TuneIn.com, Overcast, iHeartMedia, and wherever you download your podcasts.
It is time for the monthly Volunteer Monitoring Program report. The Volunteer Monitor Program is a joint initiative between ARRL and the FCC to enhance compliance in the amateur radio service. This is the July 2024 activity report of the VM program. 2 licensees in Florida received notices to stay off repeaters in Boca Raton, and the case was referred to the FCC for further enforcement action as appropriate. Uncoordinated repeater licensees in Virginia and New Jersey received advisory notices concerning interference to coordinated repeaters in their areas. The owners are taking steps toward resolution. A licensee in New York received an advisory notice about single sideband operation below the permitted frequency of 14.150 MHz. A licensee in New Jersey received an advisory notice concerning interference to an HF net and his refusal to comply with the net control directive to cease using the net. He was also warned that his license renewal date was imminent and that administrative review of his license application, if filed, would be recommended to the FCC. A GMRS operator received an advisory notice for operating on an amateur repeater in Tennessee after being requested by the repeater owner to stay off the repeater. Any further operation will be referred to the FCC. An operator in South Carolina received a commendation for activities on the Grand Strand Amateur Radio Club repeater operating on 147.100 and 441.775 MHz. The operator participated as net control for the first time, on short notice, and managed all check-ins in a timely and efficient manner. An operator in Louisiana received an advisory notice for operation with an expired license. Technician class operators in Indiana, Idaho, and Mississippi received advisory notices for operating FT8 on 40 meters. Technicians may operate only CW on 40 meters. We would like to thank Volunteer Monitor Program Administrator Riley Hollingsworth, K4ZDH, for this report.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. Here is a story that is quite interesting that appeared in the AMSAT news service and came from spacenews.com. SpaceX received a contract from NASA to develop a version of its Dragon spacecraft to deorbit the ISS. It will have 46 Draco thrusters, including 16 used for attitude control and 30 more for maneuvers. Once built, it will be turned over to NASA. It will be launched after the last crew arrives. They will then depart the ISS when the current 400-kilometer orbit decays to 330 kilometers. It will take about 6 months for the ISS to naturally return to the Earth's atmosphere and make a splash in a remote part of the ocean. For those that have worked an astronaut or a visitor aboard the ISS, those will be some good memories. It will be interesting to see what will develop for future generations. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time once again for the latest in solar weather. Here is this week's solar forecast by our own solar prognosticator Tad Cook, K7RA in Seattle, Washington. High solar activity continued this week, with the average daily sunspot number changing from 208.1 to 208.9, and average daily solar flux from 193 to 207.3. The average daily planetary A index shifted from 6 to 14, and the average middle latitude A index rose from 7.3 to 13.1. The Penticton Observatory in British Columbia reported a solar flux of 400.7 at noon on July 30th, which we threw out due to obvious overload at the facility. We used values from the morning and afternoon to come up with our estimate instead. This week, 9 new sunspot regions emerged. One appeared on July 25th, 2 on July 26th, another on July 28th, and another on July 29th. Additionally, 2 more spots appeared on July 30th and another 2 on July 31st. The first rumblings of the Sun's next 11-year solar cycle have been detected in sound waves inside our home star, even though it is only halfway through its current one. This existing cycle is now at its peak, or solar maximum, which is when the Sun's magnetic field flips and its poles swap places, until mid-2025. It affects activity on the Sun's surface, with sunspots, flares and coronal mass ejections all more rampant at solar maximum. This leads to a surge in electromagnetic energy hurtling towards the Earth and makes aurora visible more often and at lower altitudes. The current solar cycle, named Cycle 25 because it is the 25th since 1755 when extensive recording of solar sunspot activity began. So looking ahead at the predicted solar flux for the near term, it will be 220 on August 3rd. 215 on August 4th, 200 on August 5th through the 7th, 185 on August 8th, 190 on August 9th through the 11th, and 195 on August 12th and 13th. The planetary A index prediction for the near term will hold steady at 5 beginning on August 3rd all the way through the 21st, then 10 and 8 on August 22nd and 23rd.
In Radio Sport this week, more grape contest. August 1st and 2nd, the Walk for the Bacon QRP contest, that's CW. August 2nd, the NCCC FT4 Sprint, that's FT4. Also on August 2nd, the NCC Sprint, that's CW. August 3rd and 4th, the Batavia FT8 contest, digital. August 3rd and 4th, the 1010 International Summer Contest, single sideband, phone. August 3rd, the European HF Championship, CW and phone there. Also on August 3rd, the WAB 144 megahertz low power phone. And then August 3rd and 4th, it's the North American QSO party, that's CW. And also on August 3rd and 4th, it's the ARRL 222 megahertz and up distance contest, CW, phone, and digital. And remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions on August 3rd, the Kootenai Amateur Radio Society sponsoring the ARRL Idaho State Convention. That's in Post Falls, Idaho. August 3rd, the Elkhart East Hamfest sponsoring the ARRL Central Division Convention. That's in Elkhart, Indiana. August 4th, the SVARC Berryville Hamfest sponsoring the ARRL Virginia State Convention in Berryville, Virginia. August 17th and 18th, it's the Huntsville Hamfest, sponsoring the ARRL Southeastern Division Convention. That's in Huntsville, Alabama.
The Radio Society of Great Britain is offering what its website is calling a Feast of Amateur Radio at its convention in Milton Keynes this coming October. Once again, AMSAT's colloquium will take place at the same time during the convention, which is between the 11th and 13th of October. The ups and downs of Solar Cycle 25 and their particulars of sporadic E are two of the propagation-related presentations being offered this year. Steve Nichols, G0KYA, chair of the Propagation Studies Committee, will discuss the solar cycle and the predictions he made 3 years ago. Chris Deacon, G4IFX, will be exploring sporadic E and its use for amateur contacts. In all, there will be 3 thematic streams of presentations in the program: Getting Started, Operating, and Technical. For details, visit the Society's webpage at rsgb.org/convention. There is also a convention update in the August issue of RADCOM, the RSGB's magazine.
Sponsored by the New Jersey Knights of Columbus Amateur Radio Club, special event station K0C will be active August 4th through the 8th, 2024, 000 Zulu to 2359 Zulu. KOC will be in operation from various locations throughout the state of New Jersey, the United States, Europe, and in Quebec, Canada. That's the site of the Knights of Columbus 142nd Supreme Convention. Contact can be made using 7.185, 14.250, 18.140, and 21.350 megahertz. Certificates and QSL cards are available from Thomas and Perotti, N2JIE, 785 Vinland Avenue, Bridgeton, New Jersey, 08302-4822. That address is available online at arrl.org.
Hams from the Twin State Radio Club, W1FN, had a chance to operate phones in a very different way recently. Dave Coulter, WA1ZCN, and other club members visited the New Hampshire Telephone Museum on the 27th of July to give visitors a 2-hour taste of amateur radio. Many of the visitors turned out to be hams themselves. The program focused on amateur radio as a family-friendly activity with a strong public service component, showcasing a wealth of technical advances being made every day. According to Graham Gifford, the museum's director of programming, the amateur radio presentation was a natural fit for what is essentially a museum of communications. Although the Warner, New Hampshire building showcases a wide array of telephones and telephone history, the story it tells of different types of communication through the years extends beyond that. Previous museum events have included an after-school presentation this past April about the solar eclipse and its impact, and a discussion of the Navajo code talkers of World War II.
Now celebrating our 25th year keeping the amateur radio community around the world informed, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available worldwide as a podcast from our web at twiar.net.
The 3Y0K Bouvet Island expedition, which suspended its acceptance of donations in April while organizers reassessed the trip's financial picture, has plans to go forward with a $1.6 million budget in 2026. According to the expedition website, negotiations are underway for a contract with a large transport vessel. The team says it already has received all the helicopter permits necessary from the Norwegian Polar Institute. The de-expedition's cost is expected to be shared with a small private group, according to organizers. The website describes the de-expedition as a large-scale operation with 20 to 24 operators, but said the team still needs between 4 and 6 additional amateurs for CW and SSB operation. The 3-week trip to the remote island is to be fully financed up front, but Bouvet's planners hope to restart their fundraising campaign soon, seeking donations from individuals and clubs as a way of recovering some expenses. The fundraising is not expected to resume until a contract is signed for the vessel.
On July 9, 2024, Europe's newest rocket, the Ariane 6, launched with a range of missions on board, each with unique objectives and dedicated teams. Among these missions was PariSat, a project that highlights the ingenuity and dedication of the Giraffe Aerospatial Club. This amateur space club, composed of young engineers aged 15 to 25, has been working diligently on satellite testing, with the goal of exploring how different materials handle heat dissipation in space. The core of the PariSat experiment is to determine which materials are most effective at dissipating heat in the harsh environment of space. The project, however, is not just about the scientific results, but also about the educational journey for the young engineers involved. Based in a modest building near the Georges Carpentier Stadium in Paris's 13th district, the club members work after school, applying their passion for space to design and build the satellite experiment. PariSat features 8 small square plates, each just 4 centimeters wide, which function as space radiators. These plates were chosen to test various properties such as material composition and color, and their responsiveness to heating and cooling. Equipped with temperature sensors, each plate provided data on the black body radiation during the nearly 3-hour flight on Ariane 6's upper stage. This data will help validate the Stefan Boltzmann law of thermal radiation, a principle discovered in 1884. In addition to the scientific experiment, PariSat includes a photo component. The team has adapted a GoPro camera for space use, which is controlled by a module entirely designed by Giraffe Aerospatial. This camera, featuring a fisheye lens, captured stunning images of Earth, showcasing the planet's curvature and adding a visual dimension to the mission. PariSat is part of a larger set of 5 experiments, including Peregrinus, Sidlock, Li-Fi, and YPSat, which also remained attached to Ariane 6's upper stage during the 3-hour flight. These experiments gathered data as the upper stage's orbit was adjusted by Vinci engine, which can be restarted multiple times. The collected data was transmitted back to Earth and received by the Swedish Space Corporation's telemetry station in Kiruna, Sweden. As the Giraffe Aerospatial team begins analyzing the data, the PariSat mission serves as a testament to the capabilities of young engineers and highlights the potential for youth-led initiatives in space science. With this mission, the team looks forward to future projects, driven by the experiences and the successes gained from their participation in the Ariane 6's first flight.
Sundip Kumar Nanda had a long career in public service in his home state of Gujarat, focusing on public service and welfare foremost on his agenda. His efforts included overseeing relief provided in the aftermath of a 2001 earthquake and strong advocacy for blood donation and the Ayurvedic system of traditional medicine. One of his prominent contributions as a public service was to introduce amateur radio in parts of the state underserved by traditional communication services. Following a cyclone in 1997, when he was serving as a relief commissioner of the state, he promoted ham radio to ensure that hard-hit districts still had a means of communicating. He advocated again for amateur radio in 2001 following an earthquake in January. That same year, the Gujarat Institute of Amateur Radio was created. With his extensive expertise in disaster communication management, he was chosen as its chairman. His radio communications endured, especially in 2023 when Cyclone Biparjoy struck the state, and the Gujarat Institute of Amateur Radio sent 38 hams to the State Emergency Operations Center to assist with disaster communications. He and his wife were visiting their daughter in New York at the time of his death on July 26th. Local media said the cause was cardiac arrest. Nanda was 68.
The TEVEL satellite project, featuring a series of CubeSats designed and built by Israeli students, has entered its final phase with the beginning of atmospheric reentry and decommissioning. This initiative, a collaboration between the Israel Space Agency and the Tel Aviv University, has been a key educational tool, providing practical experience in satellite technology to students across Israel. Launched in January of 2022 on the SpaceX Falcon 9 Transporter 3 mission, the TEVEL satellites were part of a broader effort to promote STEM education. The CubeSats, built to the 10 by 10 by 10 centimeter standard, were used for various missions, including scientific data collection, amateur radio communication, and technology experimentation. The project aimed to enhance students' understanding of satellite technology and prepare them for careers in the space industry. In addition to their educational value, the TEVEL satellites played a significant role in the amateur radio community. Equipped with radio transponders, they allowed amateur radio operators worldwide to communicate via satellite, fostering international collaboration and technological experimentation. This feature provided a unique platform for enthusiasts to engage in satellite communications. As the satellites now re-enter Earth's atmosphere, this phase marks the end of their operational lives. The re-entry process, which involves the satellites burning up on re-entry to prevent space debris, is being monitored by both educational teams and the broader space community. This final stage offers a valuable learning opportunity for students tracking the satellite's descent and analyzing the data. Looking ahead, David Greenberg, 4X1DG, has announced a new level of TEVEL missions featuring 9 additional satellites, continuing the educational and amateur radio goals of the original initiative. The decommissioning of the TEVEL satellites highlights the importance of responsible satellite disposal to minimize space debris and ensure the sustainability of space operations. The success of the TEVEL project sets a precedent for future educational satellite initiatives, demonstrating the hands-on learning can be integrated with the practical space missions. As the satellites complete their final descent, they'll leave behind a legacy of inspiration and international collaboration in both industrial, educational, and amateur radio.
You're listening to America's premier amateur radio news magazine of the air, This Week in Amateur Radio.
It is time now for AMSAT's weekly satellite shorts from all over. First up this week is the ASRTU-1 satellite. It is a 12U CubeSat mission developed by students from the Harbin Institute of Technology and Bowen State Technical University. It is designed for educational purposes and features an amateur radio SDR payload. The satellite will offer telecommand uplink and telemetry digital image downlink capabilities. Harbin Institute of Technology, known for developing successful amateur radio satellites like LilacSat-2 and DSLWP-B, has created a new SDR-based transceiver for the ASRTU-1. This transceiver will provide communication resources, including a VU-FM transponder, UHF telemetry downlink, and a 10.5G image downlink. Scheduled to launch from Vostochny Cosmodrome on November 2024, ASRTU-1 will operate in a 530-kilometer sun-synchronous orbit with coordinated downlinks on 436.210, 435.400, and 10,460 MHz, and a repeater uplink on 145.875 MHz. Next up, the 188,000-pound, 212-foot-tall core stage for the Artemis II moon mission has arrived at NASA's Kennedy Space Center following a 900-mile journey from Michaud Assembly Facility in New Orleans. This milestone marks a significant step in preparing for the Artemis II mission, which aims to return humans to the moon for the first time in over 50 years. NASA astronauts Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen are slated to launch on this mission as early as September 2025. Upon arrival at KSC, the core stage was transferred to a self-propelled transporter and moved into the iconic vehicle assembly building. Engineers will soon begin processing the stage for stacking operations involving the integration of the twin solid rocket boosters and the spacecraft. The Space Launch System rocket's twin boosters and the core stage's 4 RS-25 engines will generate nearly 9 million pounds of thrust at liftoff, propelling Artemis II and its crew to the moon. And finally this week, NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams will remain at the International Space Station with no set return date due to ongoing technical issues with Boeing's Starliner capsule. The astronauts departed for the ISS in early June on a test mission expected to last about a week, but faulty thrusters and helium leaks have delayed the return. Despite some thrusters now functioning normally and the leaks being stable, NASA and Boeing are still not ready to schedule their departure. NASA assures that the astronauts are not stranded and the technical issues do not pose a threat to the mission. Engineers are conducting tests, including on a spare thruster in New Mexico, to understand and resolve the problems. Steve Stitch, NASA's Commercial Crew Program Manager, emphasized the priority of the astronaut's safety and the consideration of backup return options.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77 @gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon.
And finally this week, we were wondering who listens to BBC content internationally. The organization has released its 2024 global audience measurement and put the number at 450 million weekly, an increase of 3 million from last year. The Global Audience Measure is an annual update of how many people consume the BBC weekly for all international services in all countries across TV, radio, website, and social media. It excludes the BBC's output aimed at the UK market. BBC World Service offerings, operating in 42 languages, drew an audience of 320 million. BBC News Arabic saw a 9% increase, which the broadcaster attributed to the Israel-Gaza war. The Gaza Daily Emergency Radio Service, broadcasting on 6:39 a.m., is also part of the figures. The Arabic feed is the BBC's second-largest language service behind its BBC News Hindi service.
This Week in Amateur Radio is heard around the world on amateur radio repeater systems, streaming on the internet, or on great low-power FM broadcast stations like WGXC-FM, part of the Wavefarm, on 90.7 MHz in Akron, New York, serving Greene County and the southern regions of New York's Capital District. Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.